All right, hello everyone. Today is July, well now the 2nd. It's about a little after 1 a.m. We just finished up the Friday after Dexcon. Dexcon, if you're not familiar, is a gaming convention where they have a variety of different events, ranging from board games to role-playing games to LARPing, you name it. I'm joined here with Kyle. Say hello.
Hello.
Oh, you should have said hello, Kyle.
I
Come
should have.
on.
I
Yeah.
should have. I
You
missed
dropped
my
the
cue.
ball.
And that voice you're hearing also is Dylan.
Sure is.
Yes. So I thought this would be a good idea to go ahead and give for those of us who are unfortunately unable to attend Dexcon for some reason or are hesitant to give a little bit of an idea
Those
of
poor souls.
yes.
I was once like them. To think that once I could not see beyond the veil of this reality, to see those who dwell behind. I was once a fool. But yes.
So
ton of fun.
yes. Like I said, today is the Friday after. It technically
Well,
started.
now it's Saturday.
Well, yeah, now it's Saturday. But it technically started on Wednesday, which is more just opening event stuff and kind of gathering stuff. And then Thursday. So we're going to talk a little bit about Thursday because these guys came a little bit later, and I came actually a little bit more towards the middle there. So we're just going to give a quick kind of rundown about the games, what we experienced, what we liked about them, to kind of give you a snapshot of our experiences. By the way, this just to clarify, this is I feel very opinionated view.
Oh yeah.
So this is not direct judgment or critique. We're not, I'm not good at that. I can't speak for the rest of us here. So this isn't like, oh well, they said so and so game was good or bad, and blah blah blah. Like, make whatever decisions that you want. These are just our feelings, our interpretations, and just talking about what we feel.
Well, Brian, that's your goal. My goal is to judge very harshly.
Well, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely.
All right, so that is my goal. I can only speak for myself. So I'm gonna go ahead and talk real quick because I started.
Yeah, you start.
yeah,
You had the
yeah.
first games.
So the first games I had, let me see what one I had. I'm drawing a little bit of a blank.
No, I think you are. And if not, I'll take advantage with this whiskey.
Alright, so the first game I played was a game called Lady Blackbird. So Lady Blackbird is very reminiscent of think kind of Firefly, where everybody is kind of given sort of aspects and keys. You're all trying to go ahead and
What's an aspect and what's a key, Brian?
well, I don't want to get too into the nitty-gritty, but basically, like everybody kind of has a role that they're playing more or less. I was playing Snargle, who was a goblin, but I had all sorts of interesting things. For example, I had keys of Daredevil, so anytime I was able to pull off a really cool maneuver or did something dangerous, I was able to kind of get an XP bonus, which could be built up and unlock other abilities. But I also had a key of compassion, which also motivated me to go ahead and help others.
And I have a cool question about this. You said you were a goblin, but you opened by saying the game was somewhat like Firefly. Can we
So I mean,
can
it's
we reconcile
it's a
these
mishmash,
things?
a little bit of fantasy, but mainly
Right.
kind of like sci-fi. You're on a ship. You're carrying this person who's Lady Blackbird, and she's kind of on the run. In this game, she can kind of conceal herself. She was kind of playing a teenagery. I'm going to go off and marry this pirate king, who of course had no idea who she was. But it's really interesting. It has some very fun mechanics. You basically kind of say, all right, I want to go ahead and do this thing. So you tag these kind of aspects. So I'm like, all right, I'm a pilot, so I can go ahead and do maneuvering, aerial combat, and stuff like that. And then you roll that many dice. And if you roll 4 or above on those dice, you can go ahead and lead to success based on how many of 4 or more that you had. But yeah, I don't want to get too nitty gritty into it. I had a very fun experience. A lot of the players were excellent. We had a lot of fun. Kind of playing along with each other, and I had a great time. The one kind of fun thing, it's kind of more or less the same story, but you can kind of play it any which way you want. It's going to be the same role, same kind of character, but you can play those characters differently each time you play. So there is replayability here.
So, and do you make your own characters, or is it just like there's a preset list you kind of choose from?
From what I understand, how it's been presented to me, it's preset. I don't know if it's going to be that way or if it is that way, but that's what it appeared like to me. But again, like I said, you could play Snargle. Like I played Snargle as like this dashing pilot. But you can go ahead and play him as just like the prototypical, like, Snargle does this, the kind of like, Snargle.
I would certainly hope one does not.
Yes, but I mean that's a valid way to play it.
You pray that Snargle does not.
I really hope for the player of Snargle's sake.
Right. But but again, I don't want to take up too much time. But I had a really good time. So now I would turn it back to you guys because you guys played as well. You guys played the Worldwide Wrestling.
Wrestling, which we had some experience with. We played one game before with Cal's girlfriend running the game.
Yes.
So we had some experience. It's a very simple system. It's the Apocalypse system, apparently. I'd never heard of it.
Mostly, yeah.
Which just uses 6-sided dice. Your stats range from pretty much -2 to +3. I guess a -3 is possible, but you'd have to work at that.
I think in the new system you're not allowed to have anything lower than -2.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And you roll 2d6. You add whatever like modifier you have for your relevant stat. A 2 through a 6 is considered a botch. A 7 through 9 is like a partial success. A 10 or higher is a great success. And it is, I think, very interesting because the roster is competing with one another, but at the same time working together because in professional wrestling, of course, you're trying to build feuds and tell stories and you're doing that in this game on a couple of different levels. You're doing that in storyline and off camera as well.
Well, that's what makes the game interesting and sets it apart from other wrestling games. And most other wrestling games are just combat simulators.
And that's not. Pro wrestling does not really translate well to role-playing games.
So there are two aspects, essentially, to World of Wrestling. There's the aspect where the in-the-ring stuff is happening, which is essentially like combat in, say, D&D. And then there's the stuff that happens like behind the scenes. But even
in wrestling parlance, there's work and there's shoot.
Yeah. So basically you play two characters when you play a character. You play their in-ring persona and their out-of-ring persona. And you have to work those two things together to put on interesting matches. And by doing that, you can come up with a lot of interesting feuds, a lot of good angles, a lot of neat little storylines.
And what neat little storylines we had.
Yes.
Can we kind of get into detail about what went on in the games, or just sort of?
Yeah, I mean, like you don't have to go ahead and I'm just gonna suggest not to go into like everything that happened. Just give a snapshot. This is my character. This is kind of what happened, and then we'll move on.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of different characters you can play. There are several more than we had anticipated.
Yeah.
There are new characters being kind of released on Kickstarter. Every character is sort of a wrestling archetype. The one I had chosen was the jobber, which is wrestling slang for someone who is paid to lose. They do the job. It's called. They don't win. They make other people look good by losing and losing convincingly. And so my character Dickie Hartunian was an idiot. He was a moron. No, he couldn't do it. He had a finishing move that nobody had ever seen because he'd never ever managed to do it. The Dickie Death Drop. No one knows what it is. No one still knows what it is, really.
It is a mystery.
It is a mystery. It will remain a mystery. And you, Kyle, on the other hand.
Oh, yes. I played Karnov the Great, a giant. His background is he was a circus strongman until he escaped from that circus. And
it's all modern day, of course.
Some modern day, So what was interesting about this setting, essentially, is how it's basically like modern day wrestling, or even like wrestling from like the 90s or 80s, where
you can customize.
You can basically be anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And what was interesting with our game was that just on Thursday there were honestly a few things working against my enjoyment of the proceedings. We hit a lot of traffic earlier that day. We came in kind of late. We hadn't eaten much. I was not
We
in a
had
good mood.
gone to work,
We had been at work earlier,
which is never a fun time, and
Yeah,
it's particularly
so-
an unfun time.
so I was not having a great time. And then one of the issues that's possible with Worldwide Wrestling is what happens with a lot of games. They have a strong narrative, like player-driven narrative focus, which is if one person or a few people talk a lot, and they can end up dominating what's happening.
Yeah, there's a system in play wherein the game master, who's referred to as creative because they're the creative team who's like putting together matches and storylines backstage. They play the part of like the play-by-play commentator, and any player who's not in the match can take on the role of the color commentator, which, if you're familiar with wrestling, there's usually like a back and forth dynamic between these two. Usually everybody hates the color commentator because they're an insufferable jackass.
So you have people like, I'm assuming like Jerry the King Lawler.
Yes.
JR.
Is he an insufferable jackass?
Yes.
So he's
that-
on TV.
So yeah, you get to go ahead and play. Because I had a small experience playing the game, and that can be a lot of fun, especially if you have people really into that.
The problem for me was like the first time where I was given the mic. We did actually have like a mic prop, which was I appreciated that. The two guys whose match I was calling
They were very into it.
They were very into it, and they were doing a great job. But they were so into it that there was no break where like anybody, like even creative, just like didn't say anything during his commentary. It's like, well, I don't want to interrupt this, and I would feel like I am interrupting this, which I kind of shouldn't feel like. I'm supposed to be working with these guys. And it was just like, well, I didn't say a word.
Yeah. Well, that's another interesting game is that, especially for our game, this is a weird game to GM because you don't really do anything.
Well, in this particular game, because there are various like things that you can attribute to your wrestling promotion, and what we have our benefit is that it's theatrical. It's really over the top. We have a huge budget for costumes and entrances and pyrotechnics and all sorts of stuff. Our drawback, if you want to call it that, is inmates run the asylum, wherein we do not care what management says. We do what we want, and like in storyline and out of storyline, where it's just like there is utter chaos, and that worked really well in tonight's game.
And I think just as an aside, I think that's true a lot of the Powered by the Apocalypse game. Now that may not be true for all of the games, but in many of the games I've played, a lot of them kind of have the players drive the game. It's not like it's not like the GM says, all right, here's the story, and you guys can do whatever you want with the story, but here's the story, here's the background, so on and so on. A lot of this is, I want to say, the much of the heavy lifting and how the story developed is created by the characters, as opposed to more traditional games like D&D and stuff like that, where characters can influence the story, absolutely, and good GMs do that. But generally, it's like instead of being dropped into a world, you are kind of like, all right, here you go, have fun.
And this like players going to come up with their backstories in the beginning, where everybody, you have like a heat score, which again is wrestling slang for like how much is the crowd into like what it is that you've got going on. And so you've got a series of heat questions that you ask, and one of mine was like who stole my finisher and never gave me credit for it. And one of the other wrestlers the guy who plays Patty Hertz, who we'll get into later, I suppose, who becomes important for me later on. Well, I guess it was me. Like, I stole your finisher, and I never gave you credit for it. And that's not, they're very vague about whether or not this is, like, was this in storyline, was this on camera, or is this something that really happened backstage? And you can kind of decide that on your own. Like, is this heat between these two people or between these two characters? Or both?
Right. Yeah, it is appropriately vague. It leaves a lot open to how you want to interpret things, which is good.
And I think that type of creating bonds, again, is something I've seen in a lot of the Powered by Apocalypse game. That's true in Monster Hearts. They'll say, like, all right, you saw someone, and I'll get into that when I talk a little bit more when I get into Monster Hearts, but it'll be like, you saw someone die, and this person knows you saw it, and so you can create a lot of bonds and stuff because of that, which I think is really good. Because again, instead of saying, well, we all met in a tavern and now we're a group, now there's actual, like, in-game
like
things.
mechanical.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not forced because you get to go ahead and decide, all right, you're interacting with this one and here's why.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like, you just roll a die and that's that. It's which I think is good because it gives you kind of ideas of like, all right, this is what my character doing, or this is how my character to interact with this character, and it kind of gives you both ideas of how to grow. So that's things I've noticed a lot in the Powered by the Apocalypse game as well.
It is, I think, for us just a little hard to maintain like consistent energy throughout this game, just because it takes place from 8 p.m. to midnight. Although this session was absolutely hilarious, and there was a lot of wacky. Can we swear?
Yeah, okay.
There's a lot of wacky bullshit.
Yeah.
Which I guess we have to go into some of it later because it's pretty amazing.
I mean, just for like the Thursday night, stuff that happened last night. I mean, the basic gist of this is that Worldwide Wrestling is a really fun game.
Mm-hmm.
And it's suited for long-term play. It's very well suited for long-term play.
Really not a good thing for one-shots, specifically. It kind of wouldn't work.
Yeah, it would not work as a one-shot very well.
It's set up so that, like, okay, it's supposed to be a show. It's supposed to be like a wrestling show. There's even sort of rules for the wrestling promotion itself kind of growing in size and attracting new fans. And you've got to win over those fans as well. So it's like you're constantly like trying to build yourself up and build up the company.
Right. And for those at home who don't know exactly what a long con is a game. It's kind of just like how it sounds. It's a
no, just like how it sounds would be a con scheme, a scheme.
Well, yeah. But
where we steal an old lady's pension money.
Right, no.
Like one of my high school teachers, but that's another story.
Right. Basically, what a long con is, it's a series of games, the same game. So, for instance, they're playing a long con of Worldwide Wrestling. So it's one session, one slot, played over a variety of days, usually at least 2, but usually 3 days. And the good thing that I've noticed about long cons, by the way, there's also things called Christicons. A woman named Krista, I don't know, I'm not 100% sure if she kind of started the concept of long cons or if just she kind of has her own version. She's a fantastic GM. She runs fantastic games. But you might see that term kind of thrown around too, if she's running a thing. But anyway, one of the good things about it is, because you guys have kind of a 6-person game.
We have 6 people in total. One guy was only there for Thursday.
Right.
One guy was only here for Friday, but I think we've convinced him to stay on because he's now integral to a few plot lines, and he's unbelievably funny.
Right.
Yes.
Incredibly entertaining. So I think he'll wind up staying. It'll be a 7-person.
Okay, so that's good. But they can also grow into where you have multiple GMs, or you have like 14, 15 people plus, and there'll be different tables, and they'll kind of interact with each other, and it'll kind of evolve. What each kind of group does will evolve the story, and it's really interesting because there's a lot of moving parts that you can play with. So long cons, I tend to really enjoy long cons. Because your actions have consequences. It's not like, well, it's 10 minutes before the thing is over, so I don't care what I do. My character dies because I'm going to be done. I'm walking away in 5 minutes. So, but instead to go ahead.
We saw today.
Yeah. So it's
really.
So it's fun to kind of see stories evolve and build and develop and builds up, and it makes you look forward to the next day. So
yeah. And what's especially good about wrestling is that in World Wide Wrestling, a lot of the game is really story driven.
Yes.
Which if you're not really familiar with wrestling, you might think, "What are you talking about? There's no story to this." But it is
all stories. It's a soap opera where people get hit with chairs.
It's all like weird soap opera-y narrative, and it works really well.
And you can emphasize or de-emphasize the weirdness. Obviously, in our game, there's a lot of weird stuff going on.
All right.
So you want to move on to your game?
So for my game, I played Monster of the Week, which again is a Powered by the Apocalypse game. Basically, what ends up happening in this particular game, or the kind of idea behind this game is, it's like kind of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, or like where it's a group of people and you're hunting monsters. In this particular game, we were playing a group of people where we were hunting vampires. and who were kind of hanging around and sabotaging this set in Hollywood, who was trying to go ahead and build. It was a lot of puns, so it was like Mallet Studios, creating like these all sorts of like Dracula movies. But the whole concept is you have a variety of different characters. Yeah,
It's late.
yeah. You're playing a variety of different characters, and it is a little bit more combat based. But for instance, like I played the mundane. The mundane, you have like the chosen, who's kind of like more Buffy, or like you have the monstrous, who is like one of the monsters but turned to the side of good.
So Angel.
Yeah, Angel, right.
That's all I know about Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Right. There's like kind of the spooky, who's kind of the more kind of possessed or like kind of touched by magic type of character. But I played the mundane, who was basically a janitor. And I kicked at like a ton of people's asses, which was great. And like they have abilities literally called kick some ass. Which is where you go ahead and you kick some ass.
Go to town with tire iron.
Right. And I had a lot of fun during that game. I think it's good for someone who enjoys combat, but also enjoys some kind of interpersonal stuff. And you could do all sorts of really interesting things. You have all these variety of different roles you can play with, and kind of use differently every time and choose, because you're choosing the skills, so you can kind of choose them and play them in a different way, which a lot of the Powered by the Apocalypse games tended to do. So I had a fantastic time. I enjoyed every moment of it, and we were all laughing the whole time and just had a great time. So Thursday was great for me. I had a lot of good games. There were absolutely no complaints, and I had a blast. And it sounds like you guys had a blast too.
There's one complaint that I have, and it wound up being kind of a fun little coincidence. I was looking through the list of LARPs. I've never been in one. And I saw they were doing a Battlestar Galactica one, and Ursula got me super into Battlestar Galactica. I love it, and I really wanted to do it. This is something of a complaint that I had actually with the layout of the Dexcon schedule,
right?
Wherein it said beginners welcome, but then in the description it was like prior life experience needed, and it's like, well, I'm applying for a job, damn it.
Right. One thing I will say about LARPs, because I participated in one in Dreamation. It was my first time playing a LARP here, and I can't speak for every LARP because it was just my experience, but. What was good was I had fun because it was really open. I don't remember exactly what the subtext was, but I would say to just go for it or talk to them and say, I'm new to this LARP. Is it okay?
Well, I think I'd actually be able to do that because the guy who was running it is apparently, I recognized him just out of the blue when Kyle and I were sitting down eating. He runs the bookstore at Pace Law. Right. And it's just like, yeah.
Well, there you go.
We chat about wrestling, actually.
Right. So I want to say most of the games here are open to new people. I mean, that's kind of the point, I feel. So it might just say, if you are absolutely, if you don't know what the hell LARP is, period, then that might be kind of what it's trying to word by. But I want to say there's no hard and fast, no, you need to dress up or you need to have all this long-time experience. So I always, encourage to say, if you have any questions, go and talk to them or see if you can kind of find them ahead of time and say, I want to join.
Next time I'll borrow one of Ursula's friends as a colonial fleet badge from some cosplay. I'll ask to borrow that.
But even then, I said, I played in the Dresden LARP. I didn't go dressed up as anything. Some people were, and that's fine. And it was, they were very courteous and very nice. So.
I was considering also doing one of the Mind's Eye Theater ones, but I knew nothing about Mind's Eye Theater, so next time I'll study that system.
Right, and again, with the system, with the Dresden Files system, I know anything about the system, but they'll break it down. They'll say our new players come here, and they actually had a little side quest that connected to the main quest for the new people. So again, I wouldn't be too intimidated by it, but at the same time, I get what you're saying. A lot of this stuff, I have a lot of complaints. I don't want to go too much into Dexcon specifically, or the con itself.
I'm sure that's not a Dexcon exclusive issue.
Well, absolutely, but I mean, there are some things I can probably definitely say about the con itself that I can see better, but that's a story for another time.